What's up everybody, welcome back. So today I want to take a look at improving our damage a little bit. Right now we pretty much have one static value for our damage and that's always going to be the same. So it doesn't matter if we hit somebody across the map or from point blank range, it's going to do the same amount of damage. And also if we shoot him in the foot or in the head, it doesn't really matter, it's still the same. So I want to make it distance based and also location based. So for AI, we already have a headshot, but not really multipliers for the limbs or things like that. So we're going to set it up with damage multipliers for limbs, the head, the body, and then also distance-based damage. So this could be a little bit shorter video because I want to keep this separate from other stuff. So people that don't follow the entire series can still use it in their own project. So this isn't really specific to the entire tutorial, you can use it in any project you like. So if you like the series, please consider leaving a like, and if you want to get your hands on the project files, you can become a member of the channel or a Patreon, and then you will get access to the downloads in the premium Discord channel. So with all of that stuff out of the way, let's just start with today's video. So to make sure everything works differently, we need to add some variables to our weapon data table. So let's go to our weapons folder and open our structure for the weapons info. So we're going to make changes to a structure. So first of all, make sure that your entire project is saved, and then we're going to open the struct. So right now we only have one variable for damage, and that's simply the damage of the weapon. So I'm going to change this variable to be the maximum damage. So let's change the name over here. And then we're going to add a few more. So let's create a new one. And the first one is going to be the minimum damage. So min damage. And that's a float. Then I'm going to add another float. And that's going to be the maximum damage distance. I'm going to add another float, and that's the minimum damage distance. And then the last one I need is the maximum range. So let's add maximum range. So we have all of this stuff in place, and I'm going to explain how we're going to use it later in a second. But first we need to save the structure and close it down, and we're going to close the entire project and do not save all of these references. So don't save. And we need to relaunch the project, and then we are good to continue. So I'm launching it on my other monitor right now. Just a little sec. There we go. So we have the new variables in place. So first of all, let me explain how they are going to work. So I made this really sophisticated image, and I'm going to use this to explain it. So we added a bunch of variables: the maximum damage, the minimum damage, the maximum damage range, minimum damage or distance, not range, sorry, and the maximum range. So if this red dot is the player and he fires a bullet, if he hits something before the maximum damage range, he's going to do maximum damage always, no matter what the range is. Then if we hit something in between the maximum damage distance and the minimum damage distance, we're going to make the damage fall off from the maximum to the minimum. So anything in between here, it's going to be lower how farther you are to the right. If we reach the minimum damage distance over here and we hit something behind that, we're simply going to do minimum damage all the time until our maximum range, and after the maximum range we're not going to detect any hits anymore, so we're not going to do any damage at all. So this is how it's going to work. So that's where all the variables are for. So obviously we need to make sure that we also update our info table. So let's go to the weapons info table, and I don't think I'm going to bother doing all of them. But for now, for the pistol, let's make sure we have them in place so we can test something. So we have the maximum damage over here set to 15. So the minimum damage always needs to be lower, obviously. So I'm going to set that to 10. Then the maximum damage distance is the distance that's closest to me. So that's the one where I do maximum damage until that distance. So I'm gonna set that to maybe 750 for the pistol. Then the minimum damage is going to be further away. So that's where the damage falls off to the minimum damage. So I'm gonna set that to something like 1500 maybe. And then for the maximum range, that's just the entire maximum range of the weapon. If we hit anything outside of this range, we're not going to register any hits at all. So I'm going to use these values, and then I think we should be able to test them in this level as well, because it's quite a small level. So obviously you want to set those for all of your weapons, otherwise you're going to run into issues. But for now I'm just going to keep it at the pistol one, so we can test with the pistol if this is working. Okay, so we have that stuff in place. Now we need to go to our hero base character, and we want to start changing some stuff in here. So let's open up our hero base. And first of all, make sure that we set all of our new variables. So let me clean this up a little bit. We have the viewport. Do we have a construction script over here? So we're gonna go to our server set replicated weapon variables. And over here, we're already setting the damage. So we need to change this to the maximum damage. So it makes a little bit more sense. So let's do that first. Rename the variable maximum damage. And then we're going to add the new ones as well. So we can pretty much just drag off here and promote them to a variable. And I'm going to add weapon in front of them to make it a little bit more clear where they are for. So we have the weapon minimum damage. I should probably do that for this one as well. So weapon maximum damage. And then the next one. So that's our weapon maximum damage distance. And then the next one, the weapon minimum damage distance. And the last one, the weapon maximum range. So make sure we hook everything up so it's actually being set. And now, although we did add them to the replicated weapon variables function, we're not going to replicate them. So the server is really the only one that handles these variables, so there's no need to replicate them. We are replicating the maximum damage, but that's pretty much only because we need to display it on the HUD for the clients in the weapon wheel and stuff like that. Otherwise, we didn't actually need to do that as well. So they don't need to be replicated, but I'm just setting them in here to prevent unnecessary data. Okay, so that's good to go. With all of the variables in place, we want to start creating two new functions. So I'm going to create one function that takes care of our damage fall off or distance fall off, and then a separate function to take care of the location multipliers. So let's do the damage of distance. So one first. So let's create a new function, and I'm going to call this get base damage. And we're going to give it an input, and that's the distance, not the damage. So distance. And we want to turn it into a float. So first of all, we're going to set this up later so that our server process hit function does not pass on any hits outside of the maximum range. So we don't need to worry about the maximum range of the weapon in here. All we need to do is determine what the damage is going to be for this distance. So we're going to drag off the distance and promote it to a local variable and call this my local shot distance, for example. So we have it locally set. First of all, I'm going to grab a branch, and let's start with the easier parts. So we're going to grab our local shot distance and compare this. If this is smaller than or equal to our maximum damage distance, so let's grab the weapon maximum damage distance, plug it in over here. If this is true, we simply want to do maximum damage. So if we grab our image, I closed it down, I think. So let me grab it quickly. So if the distance is smaller than the maximum damage distance, so we're in this blue line over here, we're simply doing maximum damage. So that's the first one that we're setting over here. So we're simply going to grab a local variable and let's call this local damage. So, well, that's fine. And we're going to set it over here, plug it in the true pin, and we can grab our weapon maximum damage. So that's not with the other variables. So I'm going to move it down. Weapon maximum damage and plug it in over here. I need to get my notes up again because they got removed when I looked for the image. There we go. So if this is false, we're going to grab a second branch, plug it in as well. And this time we're going to check if the local shot distance is greater than. So let's look for greater than. And this time plug in our weapon minimum damage distance. Plug it into the condition. If this is true, we're going to do minimum damage. So plug it into the true pin and plug in the weapon minimum damage. So again, if we look at our image, if the damage is greater than the minimum damage distance, so we're in the orange line over here, we're doing minimum damage. So that's that part of the function. So now the only part left is the one in between the maximum and minimum damage where we need to calculate the fall off. So that's what we need to do next. So we're going to grab a branch over here. No, we don't need a branch over here because we already determined this was the last possible thing we needed to do. So we can simply grab a setter for the local damage, plug it into the false pin. And now we need to start doing our calculation. So basically what I'm going to do, let's say we hit it right at the middle of this green line over here. So then I'm going to calculate how much percent of the distance, fall off distance we traveled. So I'm going to ignore the blue line over here. I'm going to grab the length of the green line and calculate the percentage of how far we are into that line. So let's say if we hit it halfway through, it's 50%. Then I'm going to subtract the minimum damage from the maximum damage. So that's the entire fall off. And I'm going to take 50% of that. And that's the amount of fall off that's going to happen. So if we do that with nodes, it looks a little bit more complicated. So first we're going to get the shot distance. And we're going to subtract our weapon maximum damage distance. Plug it in over here. Then we also want to get our weapon minimum damage distance. And from that we want to subtract our weapon maximum damage distance. So these two variables we want to divide through each other. So divide and plug in the results like this. So this will determine how much percent of the distance of that green line we traveled. Then we're going to grab our maximum distance, our maximum damage, and we're going to subtract our minimum damage. So this is the amount of fall off that takes place over the entire length of the line, and then we can simply multiply these. So we're going to multiply the percent with the amount of fall off, and we want to grab our weapon maximum damage. Oh, come on. And we're going to subtract the result of that. So this will return the correct amount of damage. So we can plug it into the local damage, and that's the output. So that should be good to go. And now all we need to do is a return. So we're going to grab a return node. Make sure we hook up all three of the branches. And we want to return our local damage. So that's the amount of damage that we want to apply. So I'm going to call this my damage result. Okay, compile and save this one. And now we also want to do the location damage function. So first of all, let's create that function. Let's make a new one over here. And I'm going to call this a get location damage multiplier. Location damage multiplier. And we need an input for this function, and that's going to be the hit bone name. So hit bone name, and that's a name variable. Now let me show you. If we go to our character mesh, I don't have a mesh in here, so we need to open the mesh. And then especially to the physics asset. So over here, for example, all of these capsules are collision capsules, and those are the things you actually trace against if you are using a trace weapon. And the hit bone name that returns is the name of the actual capsule in this list over here. And they are conveniently named after the bones of the skeleton in this case, so that makes it a little bit easier. So what we want to do is simply grab the name of the capsule that we're hit, and determine by that we're going to set our damage multiplier. So if you open up the physics asset, you can take a look at the names that you actually want to use over here to make sure that it's working. So we can go to the function again and then drag off the name, and we're going to switch on the name. And we can simply type in the names ourselves. So we can leave a default pin. We're going to use that later, not really right now, but it doesn't really matter. So we're going to start with the pelvis, then the spine 1, 2, and 3. So that's pretty much the body. And for those, I'm going to set the multipliers to 1. So I'm not going to really multiply anything. Those are just the base damage that I'm going to do. So that's pelvis, spine 1, 2, 3. So let's go back to the switch, and we're going to add an element, and that's the pelvis, and then all of the spine bones. So spine 1, 2, and 3. Underscore 1. Spine underscore 2. Nope, with a 0 in front of it. And spine 3. And then we want to make sure that we just add all of the bones in the skeleton, or not really the bones, but the hit capsules. So for the clavicle, we could pretty much add it to the body. You could add it to the arm, so it kind of depends on what you want. So for me, I'm going to add them to the arms. So I'm going to say clavicle left, lower arm left, hand left, and all of the right ones. I'm going to set the multiplier to 0.8. So I'm going to reduce the damage a little bit. Oh, come on. Can I undo that? Thank you. So I'm going to add another element over here, and this is going to be the clavicle left. No, clavicle underscore left. And then we have the upper arm left. Oh, lower arm left. And the hand left, I think, also has one. Yes. Oh, we don't actually have an upper arm, so we can just rename our upper arm to our hand left. So that's why the clavicle is in there, probably because they don't have an upper arm. And we need to add the right side as well. So we have a clavicle right. Oh, I did it again. And then we have hand right. And lower arm right. And then we have the head. So that should definitely be a separate one. So let's add one for the head. And then the thigh, the calf, and the foot. So for those ones, left and rights again. So let's make sure we add 6 more. And then we have the thigh underscore left, and the calf left, and the foot left. And the same thing on the right side. So that should be good to go. Now we're simply going to add a local variable, and that's our local multiplier. And turn it into a float. Oh, not an int, a float. And we can simply set it over here. So if we hit the pelvis, I'm going to set the multiplier to 1 and simply hook up all of the other bones that need the same multiplier. So the spines, and then I think we should be good. Then I'm going to duplicate this one and set the multiplier to 0.8 for any of the limbs. So for the clavicle, the hand, the lower arm, and the other side as well. And then I'm also going to grab the legs and put a 0.8 multiplier in there. And then for the head, I'm going to make a 2 multiplier. So a headshot is going to do double damage. And then I also want to add a boolean for a critical hit. So let's create a second local variable. Local is crit. And that's a bool. And we want to set it to true for the headshot, so we can use it to make our damage number turn red if we have a headshot. Okay, so that's pretty much the entire function. So now we can return over here, plug in all of the branches, and then we want to return both of the local variables, so the damage multiplier, and the is critical hit boolean. So let me rename this damage multiplier, and then is critical hit. There we go. So now we have those two functions in place, and we can simply use them to calculate the correct values. So we want to start in the server process hit function. So let me grab my notes quickly and switch them. So open up your server process hit. That's all the way up here. Oh, really? Okay, let me just look for it. There we go. So we're going to start at the beginning of the function. As I mentioned, if a shot is outside of the range of our weapon, we're not going to do anything with it. So that's the first thing we want to do in here. So let's make a little bit of room. And we're going to add a branch in front of here. We're going to drag off the distance from the trace result, and we can simply compare it to the maximum range of the weapon. So do a greater than. And if it's greater than our weapon maximum range, so now we want to get to the variables again and look for our weapon maximum range. Plug it in over here. So if this is greater than the maximum range, it's not a valid hit and we don't want to register it. So I'm going to make a local variable, local is valid hit, and drag it in over here. If this is true, I'm going to set it to false, and if this is false, I'm going to set it to true. So that should be hooked up like this. If this is a valid hit, we want to get our base damage. So we can grab the function that we just created, get base damage. So this will return the damage adjusted by the distance. So we need to plug in the distance from the hit result again. And this will give us the damage result that we need to continue our calculation. So first we're going to promote this to a local variable as well. Local damage result. It actually worked out, okay. And then we can plug it right back into this branch. There we go. So for this upper branch, we don't want to do anything. We're simply going to return to the end of the function to the return node. And then we do want to make sure that we return our is valid hit boolean. So we're going to grab our local variable and we want to return that over here. So let's adjust the name a little bit. There we go. So that needed a change, and then let's start with the player damage and let's ignore AI for now. So we're going to do AI in a little bit. So we're dealing with interfaces, so we need to change the interface call a little bit. So to avoid huge confusion, I'm going to do it one by one. So first we have the branch over here, checks for the AI damage interface. If that's false, we're checking for the player damage interface. And if that's true, that's where we need to be. So let's make a little bit of room over here. There we go. And what we want to do is get our location damage multiplier. So if this branch is true, we're going to call our get location damage multiplier over here. We're going to plug in the hit bone name from the hit result at the beginning of the function. There we go. And then we are presented with the correct values. So now we can multiply our local damage result with the multiplier. So let's grab our local damage result, grab a setter, plug it in over here. We're going to grab the local damage result again and then multiply it with the damage multiplier. Plug it in over here. And we can also make a local variable for the is critical hit. So let's drag off here and promote to local variable, local is crit hit. And make sure we also set that over here. And then we want to plug it back into the interface call. And for now, we want to leave it at this. So we need to come back to this call, but we want to change a little bit inside the actual interface. So that's what we're going to do next. So let's get this out of the way and let's open up our interface. So that's framework interfaces. And for the player, we need the BPI damage player. And we want to take a look at the player take damage. So right now we are passing on the entire hit result, and that's not really needed, to be honest. So we only need the location, the normal that are in the hit result, and we want the boolean for the critical hit added as well. So I'm going to remove the hit result and I'm going to add a location and a normal. So that's the impact location, and that's a vector. And also do the impact normal, and that's also a vector. So those return from the hit result. And then I'm going to grab another input, and that's my is critical hit boolean that we can use for the spawning of the damage numbers. So those are the changes to the interface. Let's compile and save it, and then we can go back to the hero base character. And if we start in the server process hit event, we can update the interface call. So I'm just going to make sure it's refreshed. That's good to go. So right now we are using the weapon maximum damage. We want to get rid of that, and we need to plug in our local damage result. So that's adjusted by the distance and the location of the hit. Then we also want to grab our local, why is it scrolling up all the time? I want to grab the local is critical hit and plug that in as well. There we go. And for the impact location and the impact normal, we can just grab them directly from the hit result, and we don't need to pass on the entire structure. So let's just plug in the location and the normal over here. And that should take care of it. So now we need to go to our other calls for this event. So I think we have a few more. So let's right click and find references. So the first one is the event take damage. So that's the actual event that's being called. So we need to adjust that as well. Let's refresh it to make sure that's good to go. So we have the impact location and the normal. And we need to replace that hit result over here. So let's go into the PvP damage first. Let me double check quickly. Yeah, we are simply going to add them in here. So take PvP damage, we have the hit result, and we're splitting that only for these impact point and impact normal. So we're going to drag these right on top of the function, the location. Oh, and it actually splits them up, so that's nice. So this is the location, and the other one is the normal. There we go. And now we can get rid of the hit result because we're not actually using it anymore. So for the take PvP damage input, get rid of the hit result. We added the location and the normal, simply moved over the pins, although that looked a little bit differently. And then for the is critical hit boolean, we're going to add an input as well, is critical hit, and turn it into a bool. So I'm not going to bother with the function right now. I just want to make sure that the calls are fixed. So this is good. And then we're going to go back to the event graph. And we also have the hit result in the take AI damage. So for that one, we also want to update it by simply plugging in the normal and the location into the event. So let's open up take AI damage. And again, we're simply only using these two. So we're going to pass them on to the event input. And then we can get rid of the entire structure. So let's rename them over here. Location, already, and normal. And then in the event graph, this can be hooked up again. So we have the impact location and the critical hit. And we also want to add the critical hit. Oh no, we don't need to add that, by the way. We can simply hook up the location and the normal over here, and that should be good to go. So apparently we have more of these calls. So let's click over here. There's an error, and that's inside the event radial damage. So this is used for the grenades. And we're actually using the built-in damage system from Unreal over here and passing it on to our own interface. So we can disconnect the hit info and just break it over here. And then plug in the location and the normal directly. So this is a sphere trace. So this is the location where we can place the shape in the world where it will not penetrate. No, in this case we want to grab the impact point and the impact normal. That should be better. And for the is critical hit, we can leave it false because this is an explosion, so we're not going to do critical hits for explosions. Let's see what the other error is about. This is for the melee trace. So if we get hit by an enemy melee attack, this is what's called. And in here, we're also plugging in the hit result, but we can disconnect it. And we're already breaking it over here, so we can simply grab the impact point and the impact normal and plug it in again. And since this is AI damaging us, we don't need to really worry about critical hits. So let's just leave that one false as well. So right now this should compile again and the interface calls should be fixed. So now we kind of want to do the same thing for the AI interface. So let's go to the interface first. That's PPI damage for the AI. So let's open up that one. And in here we only have to take damage event. And I'm going to get rid of the hit bone name over here because we already did the location multiplier. So we don't need to pass on the hit bone name anymore. We're going to do it in a different place. And for the critical hit, we want to add a boolean. So I'm going to add is critical hit to the AI interface, and that should be good. So compile and save that one, and we can close the actual interface. So now we want to go back to our hero base character. That's good. And we want to fix the input. So over here, I am on the event graph, and we have a take damage call for the AI. So that's inside of the do melee trace. Let me double check. So this is not if AI melees the player. This is if player melees an enemy or another player. So I was kind of wrong about that one when we set this up. So this is actually the event that's called if a player melees. And in here we want to grab our damage location and make sure that we hook it up. So we can grab that from the impact point of the hit result. And we also, well, we're not going to worry about critical hits like we did over here because it's a melee. So that should be good to go. And we're going to check if we have more calls to this. So let's right click and find references. And we have one over here, so that's the one we already did. And then inside of the server process hit function, we have one. So let's double click this one. We don't want to pass on the hitbone name anymore, so we can simply disconnect it and get rid of that. So let's make sure that we call our location damage multiplier function in here as well. So let's get location damage multiplier. We're going to call this before our take damage interface for the AI. So we can make a little bit of room over here. Plug this in. So we can get the hitbone name from the hit result at the beginning of the function. And then this will return the damage multiplier. So we need to multiply it with the damage result. So let's make a bit of room. And those are local variables. So let's grab a setter for the local damage result, plug it in, and we're going to get the current local damage result and multiply it with the multiplier that returned from the function. Then we also want to set the critical hit boolean. So let's drag that in as well. And then we can call our take damage and we can plug in the local variables. So right now we're passing on the maximum damage. Let's get rid of that one and let's plug in our local damage result for the amount. And let's grab the local critical hit boolean and plug it in as well. So that will take care of this interface call, and I don't think there are any other left. No, not in the base character, so that should be good to go. Now what we do want to do is go to this location damage multiplier function. And in here, we need to make sure that the bones that are specific to our AI character are also in the switch on name. So if we open up our AI character and let's go to the mesh. So we have the physics asset over here and there's actually a sword bone. So we can hit the sword as well. And we want to make sure that we have that added to our location damage function, so that way we can actually multiply the damage. So you might want to say you don't do damage if you hit the sword, but that's going to annoy players. So I'm just gonna give the sword the same multiplier as the limbs, and we can add that over here. So you could pretty much just add them to the same switch on name. I'm gonna keep it a little bit more separate between AI. So I'm just gonna add another switch and plug it into the default pin. And in this one, I'm gonna add the AI specific bones. So it's absolutely not needed, but it just looks a little bit neater to me. And there's a separation between AI and the players. So we have a weapon, sword. I don't think that was underscore sword and then underscore L, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, and then we also have a right one. So let's add a second one, and that's a weapon underscore sword underscore right. And as I mentioned, for those, I'm simply going to apply the limbs multiplier. So plug them into the 0.8 pin and it will multiply by 0.8. Okay, that should be good to go. Now what you could do to be safe is grab this default pin and plug it into the 1 multiplier. So that way, if a hit registers without a name you have in here, it doesn't get lost. It will still apply the normal base damage. Okay, so let's compile and save that. So we have this updated as well. And we already updated the process hit function over here. So that's good to go as well. Now we could take a look at the AI. So as you saw over here, we have a compile error because we changed the interface. So let's open up our AI minion base. And we want to change our take damage event, so function. So I'm already in here, and we don't have the hit bone name anymore inside of the take damage function. So that's why this variable is not valid anymore. And this also doesn't really apply anymore because we already added the multiplier to our damage. So the damage that comes in here is just the final damage that we're gonna do. So we want to get rid of this part where we compare the hit bone name. And we can get rid of this part as well, by the way. So we don't care about this local headshot thingy anymore. We have our critical hit boolean that we're using. So let's get rid of that and plug this one back into the local damage yaw setter. Just like so. Then I'm going to store the amount as a local variable. So let's grab the damage amount, promote to local variable. Oh, we already had a local damage. Okay, I'm sorry. So we can use the local damage that we already had. So let's delete the new one and set the local damage right away over here. Make sure we grab the amount from the function input. Then let's go all the way to the back over here. So we're checking our local is headshot boolean. We don't need to do that anymore because we have the critical hit stuff. So we're going to get rid of this condition. But we're going to keep the branch because in this case we want to check if our local damage is greater than our health. So I'm going to do local damage greater than, and then simply plug in the health from the normal variables from the AI. So we don't need to do this anymore, where we multiply the damage by 2 if we have a headshot. So we're going to delete that. And if this is true, so if our damage is greater than the health, we're simply going to set the damage to the health. So that way the damage number that pops up can never be higher than the actual health of the player that you hit, or in this case the AI. So we're going to grab the local damage, plug it in the true pin and set it to the health amount if this is true. And then we can simply plug this back in. So then we're going to subtract the local damage from the health and then spawn the damage numbers. Now we don't want to plug in our local headshot boolean, so we can get rid of that one, and we want to plug in the critical hit input from the event. So drag it all the way to the beginning and simply plug it in directly. And then we have our local damage here, so that's good to go. So this should take care of this event. And now we still have some errors here because we have calls to the interfaces as well. So this is the radial damage event that get calls if we throw a grenade at an AI. So we want to get rid of the hit bone name. And then we want to grab the damage location and plug in the impact point from the hit result. So critical hit doesn't apply if we do explosive damage, so we're going to leave that false. Now let's take a look at this player damage one. So this is if an AI melees the player. So that was where I was confused with earlier. So we can get rid of the hit result input over here and break it directly to plug in the location. So that's the impact point and the impact normal. And again, this is melee, so we're not going to worry about critical hits. For the amount, we use a static value right now, so that's good to go. And if we scroll down a little bit, we have the same function for the other hand. So we want to do the same thing. Simply grab the hit result and break it inside of the function to grab the location. So that's the impact point, and the normal, that's the impact normal. So now we have this ready and it compiles again. So we have our interface calls fixed as well. So there's only a few small things in the base character and then we should be good to go. So let's go back to the hero base character. And for take PvP damage, we want to fix our spawn damage numbers. So we need to pass on the critical hit. And right now we're passing on the damage amount. That's not really an issue, but we want to do the same thing where we reduce the damage if our health is lower than the damage. So inside take PvP damage, first we have two branches. We're gonna leave those in place, and then we're gonna store the damage as a local variable. So let's drag off the damage amount, promote to local variable, and I'm gonna call this local damage amount. So we're gonna set it over here first. If this is true, then I'm gonna grab a branch and I'm gonna check if my local damage amount is greater than my health. So let's grab the local damage amount is greater than, and plug in the health from the player. Like so. If this is true, we're gonna set the local damage to the player's health. So grab a setter for the local damage amount and plug in the player's health value. So if I shoot him with a sniper rifle that does 500 damage, the damage number is gonna say whatever health the player has left and not 500. So that just makes a little bit more sense to me. And then we can plug it into the spawn damage numbers, and we want to plug in our local damage amount over here to make sure the correct number pops up. And then we need to hook up the is critical hit to the actual input of the event. So that should work. And then over here, we are actually subtracting the damage. So we could replace it with the local damage amount to make sure things match up again. So let's just plug it in over here. And we don't need the damage pin there. So we have that replaced, and I think we should pretty much be good to go right now. So I'm gonna run a little test and see if everything is working. No, I'm not gonna run a test because obviously I forgot something. So we need to go to the server bullet trace function. And as I mentioned before, if a hit is outside of our range, we don't want to do anything with it. So over here we have two branches where we trace, one for the shotgun and one for normal weapons. And over here we have the server process hit. So if we open this one up, we are actually checking the maximum damage range. And if it's outside of the range, we return not valid. So if we go to server process hit, we can simply grab a branch and plug that in over here. Plug in the valid hit as the condition, and only if it's true, we're going to add the hit result to the local variable array. And if it's false, we're going to skip doing that. And we want to do the same thing in the shotgun branch over here. So only if the hit is valid and it's inside of the weapon range, we're actually going to process the hit. Otherwise, we're not even going to worry about it. So hook it up like this with the false pin around it. Okay, so now we should be good to go and we should be able to test something. So I'm going to set up a lobby and I'll be back. So I'm launching a lobby so we can see if this is actually working or not. So remember, we only added values for the pistol, so we need to test this with the pistol. Let me just walk backwards with the client a whole bunch. So right now I can't hit him, so I'm probably outside of range. I hope, otherwise we screwed up. So I'm gonna move in a little bit closer. And that actually seems to be working. So we were doing 8 damage because I hit a limb. So the minimum damage of 10 is going to be multiplied with the 0.8 damage multiplier. So that's why we didn't do 10 damage at the minimum damage distance. So right now, for example, I'm outside of range. I'm doing 10 damage, and the closer I get, if I shoot at the same spot, I'm gonna do more damage. So I'm gonna have 11, 13, 14, and right now I should do 15 damage, but I can't because he only has a few health points left, or one actually. But it does looks like it's working. So we have the distance fixed, and we also have a location multiplier. So let's make sure that the critical hit is also working. So where is the other guy? So right now, if I shoot him in the foot, I do 12 damage. If I shoot him in the body, so I don't want to shoot his arms, I do 15 damage, and if I shoot him in the head, I do 30 damage, and I get a red indicator for the damage numbers. So that's working as well. So we have our damage updated to do distance and location based damage. Pretty cool. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider leaving a like, and I'll be back soon for more. Talk to you later, guys. Bye bye.